The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury hotel ballroom, but inside, champagne glasses clinked and laughter echoed off marble walls. Madison Brooks stood in her emerald gown, her hand resting possessively on her fiancé's arm, surveying the crowd at her engagement party with the satisfaction of someone who had always gotten exactly what she wanted. She didn't notice the quiet man in the simple dark suit, refilling water glasses near the bar. She didn't recognize the gentle eyes that had once looked at her with desperate teenage hope, but he recognized her instantly, and in that moment, 20 years of memories came flooding back. Like a tidal wave neither of them could have predicted would reshape both their lives forever. His name was Daniel Mitchell, and in high school, he had been invisible. Not the mysterious kind of invisible that intrigued people, but the forgettable kind, the scholarship kid who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, and brought homemade lunches in brown paper bags because his single mother worked 2 jobs just to keep them in their tiny apartment. Madison had been everything he wasn't: popular, wealthy, surrounded by admirers like planets orbiting the sun. He had loved her quietly from afar for 2 years before finally gathering the courage to approach her one spring afternoon during their senior year. The memory still burned. He had waited until she was alone by her locker, his hands trembling as he held out a handwritten letter and a single rose he'd bought with money saved from his part-time job at the library. Before he could even speak, her friends had appeared, and Madison's face had twisted into something cruel. She had taken the letter and rose, held them up for everyone to see, and laughed. That laugh had cut deeper than any words could. She had read parts of the letter aloud to her friends, mocking his earnest confessions, and then torn it into pieces that fell like snow around his worn sneakers. The rose she had tossed into a nearby trash can. The hallway had erupted with laughter, and Daniel had stood there, his heart shattering into pieces as small as the torn paper at his feet. If you believe in second chances, in the power of kindness, and in stories that remind us we're all human, please hit that like button, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you more stories that touch the soul. That humiliation had followed Daniel through his final months of high school, but it had also ignited something fierce inside him. He had thrown himself into his studies with an intensity that bordered on obsession, driven by a determination to prove he was worth something, that he was more than the poor kid who got rejected and laughed at. He had earned a full scholarship to college, then another for graduate school. He had worked brutal hours, sacrificing sleep and social life, building a career in the hospitality industry from the ground up. He had started as a night clerk at a budget motel, but he had vision and relentless drive. Within 15 years, through strategic investments, innovative management approaches, and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate market trends, Daniel had built a small empire. He now owned a chain of boutique hotels across 3 states, each one a testament to the boy who had once been told he wasn't good enough. But success hadn't erased the scars. Even as his bank account grew and opportunities multiplied, Daniel remained humble, almost painfully so. He remembered where he came from. He still worked alongside his staff during busy periods, still knew every employee by name, still felt most comfortable in simple clothes and quiet spaces. His mother had passed away 5 years earlier, but not before seeing her son transform their lives. He had bought her a house, made sure her final years were comfortable, and held her hand when she took her last breath. She had been his anchor, his reminder that wealth meant nothing if it didn't come with compassion and integrity. Those values had shaped how he ran his businesses and lived his life. He paid his employees well, offered generous benefits, and created pathways for people like his younger self to rise through the ranks. Now, standing in the ballroom of the Grand Cascade Hotel, a property he had acquired just 6 months earlier, Daniel watched Madison with complicated emotions swirling in his chest. She looked different, older, obviously, with a polished perfection that money could buy. Her laugh was the same, though, that sharp, cutting sound that could make someone feel small. He overheard her talking to her friends about her fiancé, a hedge fund manager, about the Maldives honeymoon they were planning, about the penthouse apartment they were purchasing. She spoke loudly, ensuring everyone around her understood just how successful and invaluable her life had become. Something in her voice, though, had a brittle quality, a forced cheerfulness that suggested the perfection might be more performance than reality. Daniel hadn't planned to reveal himself. He had simply wanted to observe, to see the girl who had broken him transformed into a woman, to close a chapter he thought he had already finished. But fate or karma or simple coincidence had other plans. Late in the evening, as guests began departing and the celebration wound down, Madison's fiancé received an urgent call and disappeared outside, leaving her momentarily alone at their table. She snapped her fingers at a passing waiter, demanding another glass of champagne, with the casual rudeness of someone who had never had to serve others. The waiter, a young college student Daniel had hired just weeks ago, hurried away, but in his nervousness, he fumbled with a tray and sent several empty glasses crashing to the floor. Madison's reaction was immediate and vicious. She stood, berating the young man with words that dripped with contempt, calling him incompetent, stupid, worthless. The room fell silent. Guests turned to watch. The waiter's face flushed crimson with shame, and Daniel saw in that young man's eyes the same humiliation he had felt 2 decades ago. Something inside him shifted. He walked across the ballroom floor with quiet authority, his presence commanding attention despite his simple attire. He reached the scene and placed a gentle hand on the waiter's shoulder, then turned to face Madison. Recognition flickered across her face, confusion at first, then slowly, agonizingly, the dawning realization of who stood before her. Daniel spoke calmly but clearly, his voice carrying across the silent room. He introduced himself not as the boy she had rejected, but as the owner of the hotel, the employer of the young man she was attacking. He explained that mistakes happen, that grace and kindness cost nothing, and that how we treat others, especially those we perceive as beneath us, reveals the true measure of our character. He didn't mention their history. He didn't need to. Madison's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with the horrified recognition of her own past cruelty reflected in her present behavior. She stammered an apology, but Daniel had already turned away, helping the young waiter clean up the broken glass, treating him with the dignity Madison had refused to offer. The incident spread through social circles like wildfire. Within days, Madison's engagement fell apart. Her fiancé, himself from old money, had been embarrassed by the public scene and disturbed by what it revealed about the woman he was planning to marry. Madison found herself suddenly on the outside of social circles that had once embraced her, discovered how quickly fair-weather friends disappeared when the shine wore off. She lost her job at a prestigious marketing firm after the story went viral online, her reputation damaged beyond immediate repair. Everything she had built her identity upon crumbled like sandcastles before the tide. Months later, Daniel received a letter. It was from Madison, handwritten, vulnerable, nothing like the polished persona she had projected. She apologized not just for the hotel incident, but for high school, for the cruelty, for the careless way she had trampled on his teenage heart. She didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify her behavior. She simply acknowledged her wrongdoing and expressed genuine remorse. She admitted that losing everything had forced her to confront who she had become, to recognize the ugliness she had carried for so long. She was in therapy now, working at a nonprofit for considerably less money and prestige, trying to rebuild her character along with her life. Daniel read the letter 3 times, feeling emotions he couldn't quite name. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he thought about his mother, about the values she had instilled in him, about the man he wanted to be. Karma hadn't been about revenge. It had been about revelation, about mirrors held up at precisely the right moments to show us who we truly are. Madison's fall hadn't brought him the satisfaction he might have imagined years ago. Instead, it had brought him something more valuable, the understanding that holding on to old hurts only poisoned the person carrying them. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about second chances, redemption, and the power of choosing kindness even when you've been hurt, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and let us know in the comments how it made you feel. Your engagement helps spread these important stories to more people who need them. Before we end, drop a comment telling us, do you believe people can truly change? Weeks later, Daniel finally replied to Madison's letter. His response was brief but genuine. He accepted her apology and acknowledged her growth. He didn't offer friendship or absolution, but he offered something, perhaps more important, recognition, that people could change, that our worst moments didn't have to define us forever. He wished her well in her journey and meant it. As he sealed the envelope, Daniel realized that the boy who had been broken in that high school hallway had truly healed, not because his tormentor had fallen, but because he had risen without becoming the kind of person who took pleasure in others' suffering. The karma that had come full circle wasn't about Madison getting what she deserved. It was about both of them getting what they needed to finally become their better selves. And in that realization, Daniel found a peace that success alone could never have provided.